My mom
My
doesn't
mom doesn't
lie, and
lie,
she's not a
and
gold
she's not a
digger.
gold
I
digger.
know what that
I know
word
what that
means.
word means.
Billy's mom called her that at the
Billy's
park
mom
once,
called her that at the
and my
park
dad
once,
explained it to
and
me.
my dad
Get
explained it to
comfortable
me.
and dive into this gripping story of a woman facing humiliation from her ex-husband's toxic family. Let's begin. The silver fork slipped from Victoria's hand and clattered against the porcelain plate. Every head at the 20-foot mahogany table turned toward her. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, reaching for the fork. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed it beside her untouched salmon. Henry's mother, Patricia Caldwell, smiled from the head of the table. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No need to apologize, dear. We understand how overwhelming this must be for you. Being back here after everything." Victoria felt her 6-year-old son, Noah, press closer to her side in his chair. She placed her hand gently on his knee under the table. "I appreciate the invitation," Victoria replied, keeping her voice steady. "Though I'll admit, I was surprised to receive it." "Well, we thought it was time," Patricia continued, her rings catching the light from the crystal ceiling fixture overhead. "8 years is quite long enough to hold grudges, don't you think? We're civilized people." Henry sat 3 seats down, his new fiancée draped on his arm like an expensive accessory. He hadn't looked directly at Victoria once since she'd arrived. Coward. He'd always been a coward. "Besides," Patricia added, her voice dripping with false warmth, "we wanted to extend an olive branch, help you move forward properly this time." Victoria's stomach tightened. She knew that tone. She'd heard it before, right before they'd systematically dismantled her life the first time. Noah tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, I don't like this place." "Shoo, sweetheart. It's okay." Patricia's smile widened. "And who is this precious boy? You never mentioned you had a son, Victoria. You never asked." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Around the table, the Caldwells carefully selected guests. Judges, politicians, business partners, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Henry finally spoke, his voice carrying that familiar condescending edge. "I think what Mother means is that it would have been polite to mention you'd moved on so quickly." Victoria's jaw clenched. "Noah is 6 years old, Henry. Do the math." A woman in a pearl necklace gasped softly. Patricia's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her wine glass. "Well," Patricia said smoothly, "that does complicate things, doesn't it? I had hoped tonight would be about closure, about making amends. But perhaps we need to address some lingering misconceptions first." "There are no misconceptions," Victoria said firmly. "Only truths you've spent 8 years trying to bury." If you're enjoying this story of quiet strength and public reckoning, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below about a time someone underestimated you. Patricia stood, commanding the room's attention effortlessly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important everyone here understands the full context of tonight's gathering. Victoria came into our lives claiming to be pregnant with Henry's child. She demanded money, status, access to our family name." "That's not true," Victoria said, her voice rising despite herself. "We paid her generously to go away," Patricia continued, as if Victoria hadn't spoken. "For the sake of Henry's future, you understand. And she took it, signed papers, agreed never to contact us again." "You threatened me," Victoria shot back, standing now too. "You said if I didn't take the money and disappear, you'd destroy what was left of my reputation. You'd make sure I never worked again in this city." Henry's fiancée whispered something in his ear. He shook his head, still not looking at Victoria. "Mom," Noah said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Why is that lady lying about you?" Patricia's perfectly composed face flickered with annoyance. "Darling, adults are talking." "My mom doesn't lie," Noah continued, standing on his chair now, his small hands planted on the table. "And she's not a gold digger. I know what that word means. Billy's mom called her that at the park once, and my dad explained it to me." "Your dad?" Henry's voice was sharp now, interested. "And who exactly is your father, Victoria? Some other wealthy man you managed to trap?" Victoria's heart pounded. This was the moment. The moment when everything would either shatter completely or finally make sense. "My dad is the best dad in the world," Noah said proudly. "He's smart and kind, and he says Mom is the strongest person he knows. He says the people who hurt her before were too small-minded to see what they had." Patricia laughed, but it sounded forced. "How touching. Another wealthy benefactor, no doubt." "Actually," a familiar voice said from the doorway, deep and calm and absolutely devastating, "I'm her husband." Victoria turned, and there he was, Richard Caldwell, older than Henry by 7 years, broader in the shoulders, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that could freeze fire. He stood in the entrance to the dining room wearing a black suit that probably cost more than the entire dinner service, and he was looking directly at his mother for the first time in over a decade. The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia's wine glass tilted in her hand, spilling burgundy across the white tablecloth. She didn't seem to notice. Her face had gone completely pale. "Richard," she whispered. "Mother." He walked into the room with the kind of confidence that comes from building an empire from nothing and crushing everyone who doubted you. His eyes swept across the table, taking in the expensive guests, the elaborate setup, the careful staging of what was clearly meant to be Victoria's public humiliation. Then his gaze landed on Victoria, and everything about him softened. "Sorry I'm late. The merger meeting ran long." Henry found his voice first. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I was invited." Richard pulled out the empty chair next to Victoria and sat down, completely at ease. "My wife received a very interesting invitation 2 weeks ago. She called me immediately, of course. We don't keep secrets from each other." Noah scrambled down from his chair and ran straight to Richard, who caught him easily and lifted him onto his lap. "Dad, they were being mean to Mom again." "I heard, buddy." Richard's voice was gentle with Noah, but his eyes remained fixed on Patricia. "That's why I'm here." Patricia had recovered some of her composure, though her hands still shook slightly. "You married her? The woman who tried to extort our family?" "No," Richard said quietly. "I married the woman your family tried to destroy because she refused to get an abortion when Henry wanted her to. The woman you paid off with $200,000 and a non-disclosure agreement because you were terrified the truth would damage your precious reputation." One of the judges at the table cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should give the family some privacy." "Stay," Richard commanded, and there was steel in his voice now. "I think you should all hear this. Especially you, Judge Morrison. You play golf with Henry every Thursday, don't you? I'm sure you've heard his version of events." The judge sank back into his chair. Victoria found her voice. "Richard, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He looked at her, and the love in his eyes was so clear, so uncomplicated, that it made her chest ache. "You've carried this alone for too long." Henry was on his feet now, his face flushed. "This is insane. Richard, you left this family 12 years ago. You don't get to come back now and—" "I left because I saw what you all really were," Richard interrupted. "I saw how Father treated the staff, how Mother manipulated business partners, how you, Henry, learned to use people and throw them away." He paused. "I left because I refused to become that." "You built your empire on our family money," Patricia hissed. "Actually, I didn't." Richard smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "I returned every penny of inheritance Father left me. Built everything myself. You can check the records." He gestured around the room. "Which is why, I believe, my current net worth exceeds the entire Caldwell family fortune by approximately $3 billion. The number hung in the air like a bomb. "Impossible," Henry breathed. "RJC Industries." One of the businessmen at the table said suddenly, his eyes widening. "Oh my God, you're RJC Industries." Richard inclined his head. "Guilty." Victoria watched as understanding rippled across the faces of everyone present. RJC Industries was legendary, a tech and real estate conglomerate that had revolutionized sustainable urban development. The company was notoriously private. The owner's identity had been speculation for years. "I met Victoria 3 years ago," Richard continued, his hand finding hers under the table. At a charity function for single mothers. She was volunteering, working 2 jobs, raising Noah alone, and still managed to be the kindest, most genuine person in a room full of phonies. He looked at Patricia. She had no idea who I was, didn't care about money or status. She just wanted a good life for her son. How convenient, Patricia managed, but her voice had lost its power. It was, Richard agreed, for me, because I'd been looking for someone real my entire life, and I'd finally found her. He stood, keeping Noah in his arms. Now, let's talk about why you really invited Victoria here tonight. He pulled a folder from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto the table. Papers spilled out, bank statements, legal documents, emails. This is evidence of systematic fraud, tax evasion, and bribery spanning 15 years. I've been collecting it for quite some time. Richard's voice was casual, almost friendly. I had planned to release it to the authorities next month. But then you made the mistake of targeting my wife again. Patricia's face had gone from pale to gray. You wouldn't. Oh, I would. And I will. Richard checked his watch. Unless, of course, you'd like to make this right. Publicly. Now. Henry grabbed the edge of the table. This is blackmail. No, Victoria said softly, standing up beside Richard. This is consequences. She looked around at the assembled guests, the people who'd watched her humiliation unfold, who'd believed the lies, who'd treated her like she was disposable. I never wanted money. I wanted my baby's father to be there. I wanted a family. But you took that choice away from both of us. Henry didn't want. Patricia started. Henry wasn't given a choice either, Victoria interrupted. You decided for him. You always do. Noah squirmed out of Richard's arms and walked over to Henry, looking up at him with curious eyes. Are you the one who made my mom cry all those times? Henry looked down at the boy, at the child who could have been his, and something cracked in his expression. I'm sorry, Henry said, and his voice broke on the words. His fiancée stared at him in shock. Victoria, I'm so sorry. I was young and stupid, and I let them convince me you were lying about being pregnant. I let them convince me you just wanted money. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Victoria corrected gently. There's a difference. Patricia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here and… Mother, stop. Richard's voice cut through her protests like ice. For once in your life, just stop. The room held its breath. You have 2 options, Richard continued. Option 1. You make a public statement clearing Victoria's name. You admit the lies. You apologize. You establish a trust fund for Noah, not as payment, but as acknowledgement of what he was owed from the beginning. He paused. And you stay out of our lives permanently. And option 2? Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. I release these documents to every news outlet, regulatory agency, and law enforcement division in the state. The Caldwell name becomes synonymous with fraud instead of philanthropy. You lose everything. Judge Morrison stood up slowly. I think I should be going. Sit down, Robert, Richard said pleasantly. You're mentioned in several of these emails. I think you'll want to hear how this turns out. The judge sat. Victoria watched Patricia Caldwell, the woman who'd haunted her nightmares for 8 years, struggle with the impossible choice. Pride versus preservation. Image versus reality. Finally, Patricia looked at Victoria. Really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. You really love him? My son. With everything I am, Victoria said simply. And he treats you well? Treats the boy well. Better than I ever dreamed possible. Something shifted in Patricia's face. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. The acknowledgement of a truth she'd spent years denying. I was protecting my family. You were protecting your pride, Richard corrected. There's a difference. Patricia closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet. I'll make the statement. I'll establish the trust. I'll do what needs to be done. She looked at Noah, then back at Victoria. I was wrong about you. I was cruel. And I'm sorry. The words sounded like they were being dragged out of her, but they were real. Victoria could hear it. "I don't forgive you," Victoria said clearly. "Not yet, maybe not ever. But I accept your apology." Patricia nodded stiffly. She turned to the assembled guests. "This dinner is over. You'll all receive calls from my attorney in the morning regarding confidentiality agreements." The guests scattered like frightened birds, gathering coats and purses, murmuring excuses. Within minutes, the room had emptied except for the Caldwells and Victoria's small, strange family. Henry approached slowly, his hands shoved in his pockets. "He's a good kid." "He is," Victoria agreed. I don't have any right to," Henry struggled with the words. "But maybe someday, if you'd let me, I could at least know him? Not as a father, I know that ship has sailed. But as someone who cares that he exists." Victoria looked at Richard, who shrugged slightly. "Your call," his expression said. "Maybe," Victoria said finally. "Someday, when you've proven you've changed. When you've done the work to become someone worth knowing." Henry nodded, accepting the terms. He looked at his older brother. "You always were the better man." "I just chose to be better," Richard replied. "You still can." Patricia gathered her things in silence, her movements mechanical. At the doorway, she paused. "You chose well, Richard. Better than I ever gave you credit for." Then she was gone, and it was just the three of them in the enormous dining room. Noah yawned. "Can we go home now? I'm tired of fancy people." Richard laughed, the tension finally breaking. "Yeah, buddy. We can go home." As they walked out through the halls Victoria had once been escorted out of in shame, Richard pulled her close. "You okay?" "More than okay," she whispered. "For the first time in 8 years, I'm free." Outside, the night air was cool and clean. Their car waited, simple and unpretentious despite Richard's wealth. As they drove away from the Caldwell estate, Victoria looked back only once. Some ghosts, once faced, finally rest. Noah fell asleep in the back seat, his head against the window. Richard drove with one hand, the other holding Victoria's across the console. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being exactly who you are." "Thank you," he replied, "for letting me love you both." The city lights blurred past as they headed home, to their real life, their real family, their real happiness built on truth instead of lies. Behind them, the Caldwell mansion grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it disappeared completely, and Victoria never looked back again. If this story touched you, leave a comment about standing up for what's right, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice.